Edgelords suck. Let's get one thing straight from the get-go. I'm not talking about characters with a dark side or run-of-the-mill anti-heroes. I'm talking about the black-on-black, leather-bedecked, mall-goth, emo assholes who Tumblerinas think are dreamy because they hate their murdered parents. If I hear one more impassioned defense from their gaping maws about how you just don't understand him, I'm gonna open fire. The greater sin is how many actually good characters get lumped in with these asshats. And Elric of Melnibone is one such shining symbol of a well-rounded character in fantasy that these so-called people need to leave the fuck up. Roy was terrible. I didn't like Fury Road. I lived in Arizona. Destiny, an unseen and inevitable force that draws men from their humble beginnings to their ultimate ends, be it for good or ill. The concept of the gods or divine planning propelling our actions is an idea as old as storytelling itself. Man's struggle with the unknown frontier of the future and grappling with the two most important moments of his short life. The moment he was born, and the moment he realizes why. The realm of myth and fantasy are awash with such tales, heroes and villains alike trying to divine the future, often being confronted with predictions they wish to avoid. One such traveler is the emperor of a storied kingdom that many fear is barreling towards its end. Focus, lads, for we step onto the island of Melniboné and into the halls of Elric. Elric was created in 1961 by Michael Moorcock, an author who's been writing genre fiction for nearly 70 years. Having started writing professionally in 1957 at 17 years old, Moorcock cut his teeth by writing takeoffs and further adventures of pulp classics like Tarzan and the Holmesian detective Sexton Blake. Throughout his career, he led several genre publications, including the UK's New Worlds, a sci-fi magazine that he edited for over 20 years and was a leader in what would become the new wave of science fiction in the UK. Moorcock hasn't stopped working since those teen years, still going strong at 85 years old. While lifting up other writers in print, Moorcock created a fair few of his own stories. And if one stands head and shoulders above the rest in most people's minds, it's his doomed albino sorcerer, Elric. Although appearing over 60 years ago, Elric's saga continues to be told sporadically to this very day, with his most recent outing releasing in 2023. But today we look at the first full-length novel of the character from 1972, fittingly and simply called Elric of Melniboné. On an ancient isle, a once dominant and shining kingdom is slowly losing its luster. Though time is a factor, many citizens lay the decline at the feet of the 428th Emperor, Elric. Born weak and lame, largely animated by drugs and the mystic arts, the lithe albino ruler questions the traditions of his people, and therefore contends with his jealous cousin, Urukun. Elric's beloved and Urukun's sister, Cimmerel, bound by love to the weary sorcerer, is forever caught in the middle of their quarrels, worrying daily when the would-be and true emperor will come to blows. When a raid by the surrounding young kingdoms ends in great bloodshed and Elric close to death, Urukun makes his play to the Ruby Throne. His plotting will throw Elric to the bottom of the ocean, in the hold of a magic ship, in courts of gods, elementals, and devils, and ultimately bring about a duel that has been delayed for 1,000 years between the twin ebony blades of Stormbringer and Mournblade in the bowels of hell itself. What we have is a sweeping adventure epic that sees our characters on the high seas fighting grand battles, invading a city guarded by a mystic mirror that threatens to take the minds of whoever looks upon it, fighting demons in a realm of banished and forgotten souls, negotiating with the living embodiments of earth and water, and contending for control in a world that at once feels both rudderless and on the strings of something far stronger with its own agenda. The world surrounding Melniboné is simple in all the right ways, while keeping things open-ended enough to be fun. The isle is surrounded by what's called the Young Kingdoms, settlements and powers that have grown up on the land that surrounds the Dragon Isle and have grown more powerful over the centuries. Lacking the scope of sorcery and power that Melniboné possesses, they can only look on in envy, trying to find chinks in the armor. The religions of the world and their implied histories make the place feel dynamic, and Moorcock quickly and easily establishes hierarchy and where each place stands. Characters that help Elric along the way, like the heroic Rakir the Red Archer and Nune, who knew all, both banished to a hellish plane of shadow, speak of their arts. The former, a warrior priest of the land of Thum, and the latter, a sorcerer who wished to know all, from a being known as Orlund of the Staff, both making deals with the Lords of Chaos that Elric and his ancestors served, and both being effectively damned by their pacts. Little things like their mentioning of homelands, gods, and religious traditions, as well as locations on the map, help give the world a real sense of place. So, what was Sunglasses going on about earlier? Well, Elric is considered a prime and early example of what we think of as dark fantasy, predating the genre label, but often being pulled into it. The island of Melniboné, that serves as the center of our story, is known for its grandeur, but also its brutality. Ruled with an iron fist for 427 generations, the emperors and denizens of the island use grand sorcery, demons, and tributes to the Lords of Chaos to hold a grip on power over the world. War is waged swiftly and brutally. Slaves are taken and used without pity or remorse. Torture on prisoners and traitors is not only tolerated, but encouraged. Melniboné serves herself and her purposes, no matter the methods.
Melniboné has never stood for good or for evil, but for herself and the satisfaction of her desires. I would see that changed. You intend to alter everything?
Elric stands as a contrast to his people and to Urukun. While Urukun is a bit more in line with the traditional aspects of the rulers of the land, possessing ample appetite for violence bordering on sadistic, Elric is a bit more of a philosopher, delving deep into old tomes, making up for his physical weakness in study. This often has him questioning the ruthlessness of his forebears, while also being fully aware that his people expect the Emperor to act in a certain way.
He hates you because you are contemplative. Your father was contemplative, and no one denied that he was a fitting emperor. My father chose not to put the results of his contemplation into his personal actions. He ruled as an emperor should. Urukun, I must admit, would also rule as an emperor should. He too has the opportunity to make Melnibone great again. If he were emperor, he would embark on a campaign of conquest to restore our trade to its former volume, to extend our powers across the earth. And that is what the majority of our folks would wish. Is it my right to deny that wish? It is your right to do what you think, for you are emperor. All who are loyal to you think as I do. Perhaps their loyalty is misguided. Perhaps Urukun is right, and I will betray that loyalty, bring doom to the Dragon Isle. His moody, crimson eyes look directly into hers. Perhaps I should have died as I left my mother's womb. Then Urukun would have been emperor. Has fate been thwarted? Fate is never thwarted.
Everyone seems to call him toward ruthlessness. Cimarel pleads with him not to take the paths of mercy, fearing for his life.
Urukun is my kin, and yet I give you this advice. Use your strength against him. I could not slay him. I have not the right. Elric's face fell into a familiar, brooding lines. You could exile him. Is not exile the same as death to a Melnibonian?
His few friends, like Divanfar, master of the dragons of Melniboné, also doesn't understand why Elric won't deal more harshly with Urukun when his disrespect borders on treason.
Elric refuses to understand the danger, Princess Cimarel. Urukun's ambition could bring disaster to all of us. Including Urukun. Aye, including Urukun. But how can we avoid this, Cimarel, if Elric will not give orders for your brother's arrest?
When Cimarel is kidnapped by her brother and is nowhere to be found, Arioch, a demon lord of chaos, has a desperate Elric swear fealty to him.
A beautiful youth stood there, where the fly had hovered. The beautiful youth spoke in a beautiful voice, soft and sympathetic and yet manly. He was clad in a robe that was like a liquid jewel, and yet which did not dazzle Elric, for in some way no light seemed to come from it. There was a slender sword at the youth's belt, and he wore no helm, but a circlet of red fire. His eyes were wise, and his eyes were old, and when they were looked at closely, they could be seen to contain an ancient and confident evil. You alone are fit to serve, Arioch. It is long since I was invited to this plane, but now that I am here, I shall aid you, Elric. I shall become your patron. I shall protect you and give you strength, and the source of your strength, though master I be, and slave you be. How must I serve you, Duke Arioch?
When Elric puts hands on the ancient black sword Stormbringer, it pushes him towards bloodshed and violence.
Stormbringer dashed for Urakun's momentarily undefended throat. Elric clung to the sword and dragged it back, sparing his cousin's life. Stormbringer whined almost petulantly, like a dog stopped from biting an intruder, and Elric spoke through clenched teeth. I'll not be your puppet, Runeblade.
At every turn, Elric is confronted with the fact that his fate may say one thing, and that one thing is that he will lead himself and his people to ruin. The implication is always that things are going to fall apart. The world is moving on, and maybe if Elric was tougher, he'd be able to stop it. As they set upon the invaders, Elric duels the captain of one of the vessels, and is faced with a gnawing question.
You should leave us alone. We offer you no harm, barbarian. When did Melnibone last sail against the young kingdoms? You offer us harm by your very presence, Whiteface. There is your sorcery, there are your customs, and there is your arrogance. Is that why you came here? Was your attack motivated by disgust for us? Or would you help yourselves to our wealth? Admit it, Captain. Greed brought you to Melnibone. At least greed is an honest quality, an understandable one. But you creatures are not human. Worse, you are not gods. Though you behave as if you were, your day is over and you must be wiped out, your city destroyed and your sorceries forgotten. Perhaps you are right, Captain. I am right. Our holy men say so. Our seer predicts your downfall. The Chaos Lords whom you serve will themselves bring about that downfall.
Is his time truly over? It's a repeating question in Elric's mind. Even the godlike beings he encounters seems to be unable or unwilling to answer it.
You spoke earlier of intertwined destinies. Do you then know something of my destiny? A little, I think. Our world grows old. Once the elementals were powerful on your plane, and the people of Melnibone all shared that power. But now, our powers wane, as does yours. Something is changing. There are intimations that the lords of higher worlds are again taking an interest in your world. Perhaps they fear that the folk of your kingdoms have forgotten them. Perhaps the folks of your kingdoms threaten to bring in a new age, where gods and beings such as myself no longer have a place. I suspect there is a certain unease amongst the planes of the higher world. You know no more. King Strasha raised his head and looked directly into Elric's eyes. There is no more I can tell you, son of my old friends, save that you would be happier if you gave yourself up entirely to your destiny when you understand it. I need you to answer 2 questions. Your first question I cannot answer. I will not answer. You must accept that you have now sworn to serve me. I will not tell you what the future holds, but you need not fear if you serve me well. I still remember some of my powers and my knowledge from time to time. I know you seek the Black Swords. I know you are Elric of Melnibone. I know what will become of you. You know my destiny. Tell me what it is, Noon, who knew all. Noon opened his mouth as if to speak, but then firmly shut it again. No, I have forgotten. No, you remember. I can see that you remember. I have forgotten. He has forgotten, Elric.
This leads to Elric being quite melancholy, brooding over his lot in life and whether his actions matter. This struggle, along with the brutality and generally downbeat tone of the setting, with his kingdom in decline and the world moving on, gets his story slotted into dark fantasy, and gets the character labeled with the unenviable title of Edgelord. This is not helped by his allying himself with demonic powers when backed against the wall.
I envy you those friends, Elric. You may trust them. Rakir looked at the rune sword hanging on Elric's hip, but you would be wise to trust nothing else.
And so, Elric deserves the title, right? The sad sack OC albino who works with hell but is like really sad and tortured, man. An NPR reporter once called Elric Far and away, the coolest, grimmest, moodiest, most elegant, degenerate, drug-addicted, cursed, twisted, and emotionally weird mass murderer of them all. And who am I to disagree with the public? I'm your captain. And I do. Elric and the setting he inhabits could be called dark fantasy. Sure. However, I would argue that the story fits pretty snugly with the rest of Sword and Sorcery. Some have read Elric as a subversion and negative color image of Howard's Conan. Physically, that holds water. Elric and Conan couldn't be more different, with the latter being a physical powerhouse and without decorum, while the former is physically weak with the regal air of royalty. Their methods differ, their weapons and backgrounds differ. It's all very obvious that Elric is supposed to be everything Conan is not. That being said, I'd argue the philosophy at the center of this first novel, at least, is shades of the same idea that Howard gets at. What is a man's responsibility? And how far are you willing to fight for freedom? The wrinkle that Moorcock adds is the seeming inevitability of fate and destiny, something Conan never had a struggle with. However, Howard has two other characters that would fit the mood a little bit better. The doomed kings of Bran Macmorn of the Picts and Kull of Atlantis. The latter's doom coming all of a sudden, the former the last living example of what his people once were before the fall of his kingdom. We talked about the things inherent to the genre when we talked about Conan, with grit, personal stakes, the cost of violence, and the horrible power of the mystical, setting it apart from the other subgenres of fantasy. Moorcock imbues this tale with all of that in spades. And in this reporter's opinion, if that's all it takes to make something dark fantasy and make the lead an edgelord, then the entire genre of heroic fantasy might as well be added to the pile. It's entirely possible that future stories go off the rails and get dark to a point that it needs a new genre. But from where I'm standing, it feels in line with its forebears enough to keep it simple. I feel a part of what makes Elric special is the genuine struggle that he has with all of it, instead of ambivalence or glee. That word melancholy, I feel, is a great defining term for the character. Elric is an anti-hero in the sense that he does bad things for arguably the right reasons. However, this doesn't make him without morals. Very rarely is the traditional way what he wants to do. As a matter of fact, every attempt is made to not take the more brutal way out. Elric at this stage isn't ruthless or cold. His disappointment and pain at what seems inevitable or expedient doesn't seem to dull his desire to be a better, more merciful, and more well-rounded man. But is his fate inevitable? Does time march over him? Can he save the people around him under his own strength? Will his deals with gods and monsters and the black magic sword by his side consume him? These questions are never far from his mind, but the answer seems to be, no matter what the future holds, we'll do what we can while we can. Now, all of this isn't even touching Moorcock's concept of the Eternal Champion and his multiverse, the idea that Elric stands as the linchpin of sorts for order and balance, whether he likes it or not, on his plane of existence, along with Moorcock's other characters on their respective planes. Elric's saga is long and winding, so some of my observations may seem strange or obvious to those who've trucked through the whole series. I'm just calling it how I see it from where I stand, which is right at the beginning. Whether Elric is a cautionary tale or an inspirational one is up to the reader. I suppose it depends on your view of destiny. In either view, just know that some methods are better left to those it suits. Should you be reading Elric's adventures? If you dig fantasy in that heroic tradition, then yes, absolutely. Moorcock provides a great story in a wide, intriguing world that makes you want to see who makes it out. Coming in at a slim 130 pages in this volume, it's a great read that's a page-turner. Have no doubts and check it out. Next time, a new book from a newly minted author. We ride the tracks that descend into Gnome Cave. In the meantime, show 'em some guts.